It wasn't just that it was wasted. That inheritance ruined her life.
Hi, this is Jeff Marsocci, the Plain English Attorney, and welcome to the video. Before we dig into today's topic, please help us get out solid, accurate information on estate planning and Medicaid planning by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Unfortunately, the algorithms just tend to favor videos that tell people what they want to hear instead of what is actually true. If you want us to get the truth out there about estate and Medicaid planning information, then please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Well, welcome. I'm Jeff Marsocci, and I have my partner in crime, Mike Brooks. He is the asset coordinator at my law office. The law offices of Jeffrey G. Marsocci, PLLC. Sounds very official, right? Yes. I am actually known as the Plain English Attorney because I did something when I finally got my law degree, passed the bar. I didn't go and work anywhere else. I ended up starting out my business right on my own. And I think what that really did is it gave me a big benefit of talking with my clients, figuring out what they wanted, and then finding the best way to get there. So I didn't get all of this stuff being taught to me, oh, this is how we've always done it. And I think it's helped me be a lot more creative. Plus, I wasn't doing what I call code talking with other attorneys all the time, which is, well, according to CFR section 1256, well, you're forgetting the Miller case. And I tend to turn to those attorneys and go, do you really talk to your clients like that? No. So what I like to do is make sure that I'm explaining things to my clients in as simple terms as possible and help them reach their goals. So today we are talking about legacies. Your legacy, your way, techniques, tips, and tools for HD families. All right, so let me first ask, in terms of a legacy, what's more important to you? That you leave a good legacy to the people you love and your family, or to the outside world? What's more important to you? Family. Okay. And this is where I end up seeing if things are not done correctly, it's not necessarily a good legacy for the family, just in the estate piece of it. And health-wise, how many people here have a healthcare power of attorney? Okay, you're doing better than the national average. There are a lot of people out there who don't, and a lot of people don't realize that when they don't have a healthcare power of attorney, it just kind of ends up being with the next of kin. So what happens if you're not married, but you have 3 kids? You've got 3 kids who are supposed to be equally in charge. I can't find 3 people to agree on what to order on a pizza, let alone making these life and death critical decisions. So one legacy is, how are you going to be remembered leading up to that point when you've passed on? So having these important documents in place makes, on the health end, is critical. Now there's also kind of the estate end of things, and you want people to remember you fondly, you want to leave them whatever you're going to leave them, and you want it to be easy. How many people here have been the executor for an estate?
Just
a
by
few.
name. Just by name. I never knew what that meant.
Okay. When an estate goes through probate, there's all of these forms, there's all of these inventories, there's all of this proof and documentation that the court wants just to get the assets over to the people you want them to. And it's just astounding how much there is. Now, just to give you a simple thing, this was a colleague of mine talking about the probate estate that took extra time because everything was all laid out, except there was this one thing. There was this healthcare bill for like $93.17. So there was the invoice from the facility, $97.13. And then there was the bank statement showing it went to this health facility for $97.13. I'm sorry, we can't close this estate because you don't have a copy of the canceled check front and back showing that it was deposited. They couldn't find that. And so they had to go back, reopen a closed estate account, get the proof of the canceled check, and then they had to redo the paperwork because there was a bank fee for that. Who wants to go through all of that stuff and take all of the time that a probate estate does? So a lot of my clients want to avoid all of that because they want to be remembered that, okay, this was done, it was simple, and they tend to use a revocable living trust. So I just want to do what I call a speed run of the basic documents because we want to get into what are some other ways that you can actually leave a more lasting legacy to charities and nonprofits. But we would be remiss if we weren't really talking about leaving a legacy to the people that you know and love. So really I see that there are two main ways that you're handling an estate. It's a last will and testament, which doesn't mean it goes through probate, and it controls what's in probate. Then there's the revocable living trust, which is a way of avoiding probate. I don't want to get too deeply into it, but we've got all of these great resources. And for the camera, if you just go to freetrustcourse.com, I've got a free book that talks about the difference between a will and a trust and what is probate and how does all that work. So those are really the two main documents where you can list, here's where I want everything to go, including if I want money to go to charities, if I want certain things to happen in a certain way. You can also do that with a will, but now the court oversees all of that. Now there are a couple of things that I call duct tape solutions. Oh, well, I'll just name my kids as beneficiaries on my bank accounts or on life insurance and not coordinate it with a trust or a will. That does avoid probate, but there's a lot of contingencies that can be handled in the document itself that you can't just put on a beneficiary designation form. Here's a very common scenario that my clients want. It's like, okay, I have 3 children. I want everything to go equally to my 3 children. But if one of them passes on, then I want that third to go down to their children, meaning the grandchildren of the deceased child. Very, very common desire. And they'll also put into the document, oh, I don't want anybody to get anything until they're 30 or sometimes 40. Well, if you put that I want everything to go to my 3 children, and here's the kind of Latin, equally per stirpes. Right, that means if that 1/3 would go down to the grandkids. My document says they don't get it till 30. Nope. If it goes by beneficiary designation, they get it at 18. That's it. And I've seen so many horror stories in the years that I've been practicing about underage beneficiaries getting money too soon and wasting it. There was many years ago, so if I had to put a dollar figure and guess, it would probably be somewhere in the $1.1 to $1.2 million in today's dollars in a stock account. And the parents just kept saying, well, I'll get to see the attorney, I'll get to see the attorney, I'll get to see the attorney. And they never did. And the financial advisor's telling me about this. Well, the parents died in a car accident. They had one daughter, she was 2 months short of her 18th birthday. So she turns 18, demands her money, and they have to give it to her. Drops out of high school, gets married to an unemployed 25-year-old man, buys a house that she could never afford to keep up long term, and then has roughly about $300,000 still in the bank and says, I'm never going to have to work a day in my life. It wasn't just that it was wasted. That inheritance ruined her life. So in a lot of cases, making sure that we're putting together a plan that leaves the legacy in a way that's not going to disrupt or hurt them to that next generation becomes very important. So what are some of the other documents?
If you think it's important for educational videos like this to get out there, then please help us out by subscribing to the channel.
The healthcare power of attorney, I already mentioned. This is where you're naming people to make healthcare decisions for you at a point where you can't. Now, there are different ways that different attorneys will look at this. I tend to look at this as, look, if you're going to name someone as your healthcare agent, and it should be one person at a time, and then a backup, and then at least another just in case backup, 3 people in succession at least. If you're going to trust them to put them on that list, give them as much leeway to make medical decisions as possible. I've seen other documents where it's, well, they can't do this, they should never do this, they must do this, they can't do. You're just kind of tying their hands. And I see this sometimes that I don't want the agent to do this and this, and it's parents, and they just feel that there's this obligation that they have to name their kids. No. We rethink and talk about who do you want on that list. And suddenly it's, well, I thought I had to name my kids. I'd rather have my brother do it. And then they're more willing to give them all of that leeway. Now, one document that it does say, here's exactly what I want. It's a living will. And that's that kind of final end of life decision. If you've reached the point where the doctors have said you're terminal and incurable, you're in a persistent vegetative state, the way my clients look at it, it's like, look, there's nothing else that they can do. North Carolina, you can state, here's what I want. And most of the time it's, if I've reached that point, let me go. Take me off the machines, take me off the nutrition and the hydration. Okay, why not leave that with the healthcare agent? Well, you can. But I've had a lot of instances where they didn't have that healthcare power of attorney, or if they did, they didn't have a living will. And the person who made the decision carries a lot of guilt around with them. So the living will is more about making sure that the people that you're putting in charge of these decisions don't have to actually say, yes, take them off the machines. Another one that we have is a nomination of conservator. This is who would be a guardian for you if you ever got to the point where someone was saying, I need to step in and handle this and get a court involved. Well, if you get to the point where a court has to step in, the way I look at it, well, you've already kind of lost. If you've got the durable general power of attorney, if you've got a revocable living trust, if you've got a healthcare power of attorney, you've got a living will, all that should be handled privately outside of the court. So it's not usually the person that you've put in charge going and saying, here, I need this done. It's someone else trying to intervene. They're trying to impose their will against yours. And this document, the nomination of conservator, is saying, who do you want in charge? Well, you just name the same people in that power of attorney, the same people in that healthcare power of attorney. The other one that we occasionally have to go with is just an appointment of guardian if you do have minor children. So that is anyone under 18 legally has to have some kind of guardian. And that can be completely separate from who's handling the money in an inheritance case. All right, so let me open it up for any questions on that before we start getting into the other legacy stuff. Anything?
Maybe question.
Yeah.
So the healthcare power of attorney, do you always have to carry a copy of that? Because we have it, but it's in a box.
A lot of my clients have some online way to get access to it.
Okay. So
And
you
the
carry-
people that they've named might have a digital copy.
Okay.
And so if they get notified, all right, they've got that copy. The other thing a lot of my clients do is their primary care physician has a copy of that document. So if they're pulling up their records, it's, oh, we have that healthcare power of attorney right in there too.
Is that the best? Primary care, you think is the doctor is the best?
They tend to have much more of your records, and they tend to get access through the healthcare system. So yeah, that's a big one. All right. let's talk about 8 effective ways that you can leave a legacy or even donate to a charity in a way that makes sense for you. And Mike, I'm gonna call you in a bit. Actually, you know, this is probably a good point. Let me go ahead and you can introduce yourself, and then we'll have David also introduce himself.
Okay. Yeah, my name's Mike Brooks. I'm the asset coordinator in Jeff's law office. And I like to say I'm not also the coordinator, I'm a client. So Jeff's done my estate plan, and it's peace of mind. As he's, especially listening to him go through it again, reassured that if I left here and something happened, everything would go perfectly the way I wanted it with my family. But the other side we wanted to bring in was the Care Assistance Center, which all 3 of us here are part of the team at the Care Assistance Center.
Okay, and we have David Cole, who is also part of our care team, so.
Yeah, so again, we'll come back to more specifics about what that team does, but in addition to trying to find ways to pay for care and access care, I'm also, for those that do have a connection to the military, I'm a VA accredited agent and support Jeff, who's a VA accredited attorney, to access that level of benefits too.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about ways to leave money, say, to a charity. That's a big thing for a lot of my clients. The simplest way is, we're just going to put something in our will or trust. And usually that's either a dollar amount or a percentage of the estate. Now, a very common thing with a lot of my clients, 10% seems to be like a magic percentage. I'm leaving 10% to charity. What we typically do with the revocable trust is you put that 10% as going to charity on a schedule, and it's a schedule that you can update over time. So it could be, I want HD Reach to get 50% and I want the American Red Cross to get 50%. And that's, well, you know, I'm really liking the stuff that HD Reach is doing. I want to change that to 60-40. Well, you can update the schedule. You don't have to come in, re-sign the document with 2 witnesses and a notary. You can just kind of update that percentage. If it was, I want 20% of my estate to go now to the charities, well, then that does kind of require an amendment. Same thing with the will. You'd either do a new will or a codicil to it in order to change whatever those percentages are. But again, the thing with a will, you have to spell it out, and anytime you do make a change, it has to be done in the will, signed, witnessed by 2 people, and notarized. So that's the simplest way. It's just, hey, I'm leaving this. The other thing is you don't have to necessarily leave a dollar amount or a percentage. And I had a very interesting client out in the Asheville area. She left her house to an animal shelter. But there were some conditions that went along with this that we drafted into her trust. She had 3 cats of her own. And the cats were to stay in the house, and the animal shelter was to come in at least twice a day, take care of them, provide any veterinary care that was needed, feed them twice a day, play with them at least an hour for each of those visits, and when the cats finally died of natural causes, then they got the house.
Awesome.
Okay, look, we can be specific like that and put those conditions and the shelter agreed to it. They wanted to see a draft of it, of that section first, and they were fine with it. So my client is still alive. I don't know if she's still at 3 cats or it's gone up or down, but those cats are going to have a place to live for the rest of their lives. All right, so Mike, I'm going to turn this one over to you because the second way is a charitable gift annuity, and that's something where you can get some money and deductions now. So.
Yeah, okay, I'm familiar with that. Yeah, there's an organization out of Tennessee that we've worked with in the past. They've been around for quite a while. The CGA, or charitable gift annuity, is essentially you're purchasing an income stream from an insurance company, but instead of doing it directly with the insurance company, you're involving an organization that will provide a nonprofit benefit. And in exchange for that, you get tax deductions. Now, the numbers change based on the administrations in the White House, so it's better to come in and learn about it when you're ready to do it. But the idea is you can take maybe some tax-deferred money that you don't need, but you know that you're going to have to take distributions because the IRS requires it, and use that to purchase a CGA with other funds that are not tax-deferred, and then get a deduction for the distributions. And essentially you create an income stream for you, your spouse, your beneficiaries. The nonprofit gets a chunk of money at the end, and you get the deductions that you can spread out over a few years if you need to. So it's kind of a win-win-win.
Well, it's a win-win-win for everybody but Uncle Sam, but you know what? I don't care. I am fine with that if Uncle Sam's losing out. All right, a third one is a donor-advised fund. Now, this is something that I'm seeing a lot more of these days. It's where instead of contributing money directly to a charity, it's going into something like a community foundation. And this can be over several years. So it goes into this fund, and it's invested, and money gets accumulated, but it's in the hands of an actual charity at that point. So you're getting deductions for what you're putting in, and now for the rest of your life, and listing upon death, here's where the money will go. So you can put money into this donor-advised funds and still 20, 30 years later be directing where this money goes until it's depleted. But you get those tax deductions on the front end. So very popular thing that's out there. We can tell you a little bit more about it if you want, but we can look at that individually. But there are a lot more people doing it this way. One thing that I hear a lot of is, well, I want to start my own foundation. And it's like, well, wait a minute, yeah, I want this because I want to be able to give to a charity on an ongoing basis or different charities. And so I'm gonna start my own foundation. Has anybody here actually started a nonprofit and tried to get charitable status? Not a fun thing. And it's a lot of work that's ongoing. And so when I end up talking with my clients that, hey, I've got this great idea, let me start a foundation, a lot more of them tend to look at something like a donor-advised fund just because someone else is doing all the work on that end, and they're still leaving the kind of legacy that they want. All right. A fourth way is a qualified charitable distribution from an IRA. Here's the thing. We have a lot of clients. When you have retirement accounts, at some point the government says you need to take this money out. Okay, well, if they're already, say they're giving $10,000 a year to HD Reach, and their required distributions are more than $10,000. Okay, they've got to take that out and they got to incur those income taxes. Instead, they can actually direct the people managing the IRA to distribute the funds directly to the charity. Well, why would you do it that way? Not a lot of people realize that, well, look, it's deductible, right? If you take the distribution, it goes on your tax form as income, but then you get to deduct it later, below a certain line. However, the percentage of your Social Security that gets income taxed is based on that above the line level. And what you have to pay for Medicare also gets impacted by that. So if that income isn't even showing up on your tax form because it went directly to the charity, that's a much more efficient way to do it, and it's actually lowering your taxes overall. That's about the extent of my knowledge in income taxes. I can send you to an accountant if you really want to see the numbers on that. But as I joke with my clients, there really is a reason why as an undergrad, I switched from accounting to marketing when I knew I was going to law school. We'll let the accountants handle that. Another one is naming a charity as a life insurance or an IRA beneficiary. So Mike, you want to handle that one?
Yeah. So the strategy is naming the charity as the beneficiary. So like with an IRA, I actually have a client that comes to mind. She was a big advocate for the Humane Society in Cataract County. And so she specifically had said, I want to leave on one of my insurance policies them as a beneficiary. So the strategy was, okay, well, let's look at the IRA money for the nonprofit. Because that money is taxable as a when it comes out of the account as a distribution, whether it's in her life or in her beneficiary's life. The nonprofit doesn't have to pay share or pay taxes. So she's able to give them that money that's been taxed to her, and they can use the full value of the inheritance to benefit the animals in the Humane Society, while we look at the other more tax-efficient accounts going to the individuals. So it's a good strategy for, again, keeping Uncle Sam out of your pot.
Yeah, and there is one thing that I always have to caution my clients. Again, looking at that 10% that people tend to want to leave to charity, it's the most popular percentage. You don't ever want to say, well, I've got 3 kids and I want 10% to go to a charity. Okay, I'll name on my IRAs the beneficiary as kid 1, kid 2, kid 3, and the charity is 10%. Any individual inheriting a retirement account can spread that account and the taxes that have to happen when they take the money out over a 10-year period. If a charity, which is a non-person, is somewhere in that list, that could impact how long you have to take that money out. So you don't want to name a charity with individuals. And so when I have clients that actually have larger IRAs and they do definitely want that charitable bequest to come out of the IRA, we tell their financial advisor to take 10% of the account and move it into another IRA, and the charity's 100% beneficiary, and then the kids equally divide that other 90%. Just a tax-efficient way of doing it. 6 big effective way. Donate appreciated assets if you're gonna make a donation. How many people here are familiar with capital gains taxes? Even a little bit. Okay, here's just the basic theory behind it. If you buy stock at $100 a share, and then it's $1,000 a share when you turn around and sell it, well, there's $900 of gain, and you pay capital gains taxes on that. Well, if you're going to give $1,000 to a charity, rather than pulling it out of your checking account or selling the stock and then taking the money, but then it's not even $1,000 anymore, you've paid capital gains taxes, give the charity the stock, because when they sell it, they're not paying capital gains. So you're getting a full deduction on that $1,000 that you would have been giving anyway, and you're not having to pay the capital gains taxes. Again, you win, the charity wins, Uncle Sam doesn't, but that's okay.